day, and welcome to Hip History Campus, where I try to teach to the hippocampus. I consolidate historical events, facts, and analysis so that you can consolidate your thoughts before acing the test. I'm your host, Caleb Brown, and today's episode is on ancient Egypt. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow this channel for more quality educational content. You ready? Let's travel back in time. Today we are discussing ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt lasted for over 3,000 years and contributed greatly to our world technological and cultural advancement. Often referred to as the gift of the Nile, ancient Egypt's prosperity and power was centered along the banks of the ever-providing river. When studied, ancient Egypt is often divided into three distinct periods. The Old Kingdom from 2575 BC to 2130 BC, the Middle Kingdom from 1938 BC to 1630 BC, and the New Kingdom from 1539 BC to 1075 BC. Why is all of this important, you ask? Ancient Egypt contributed to numerous world advancements in the field of art, mathematics, civil engineering, and written language. Now for some background information. First, let's dive into Egyptian geography. Egypt is located in North Africa, bordered by the Mediterranean Sea, Libya, and the Gaza Strip. It is also bordered by the Red Sea, north of Sudan, and has control over the Sinai Peninsula. For perspective, Egypt is roughly 3 times the size of New Mexico. The climate is desertic with hot, dry summers and mild winters. Its terrain features include a vast desert plateau broken up by the Nile River Valley and the fertile Nile River Delta. The Nile River, being the cradle of life in Egypt, flows for roughly 6,650 kilometers, or roughly 4,100 miles. The gift of the Nile is so important that even today, 95% of Egypt's population lives within 20 kilometers of the Nile River. Secondly, we can't study ancient Egypt without taking time to recognize the pharaohs. The pharaoh is the title of an Egyptian ruler in the New Kingdom. The Egyptian people believed that the pharaoh served as a mediator between the people and the gods. Thus, the title pharaoh can literally be translated to God King. As a preserver of the God-given order, or Ma'at, the pharaoh had a strict control over ancient Egypt's land and its use. The pharaoh was considered to be responsible for the people's material and spiritual salvation. Next up is the pyramids. The pyramids are the most iconic of the ancient world structures. In fact, they are the only original 7 wonders of the world still standing today. Because Egyptian pharaohs believed that they would become gods upon crossing into the afterlife, they erected giant pyramids or tombs for themselves. The Great Pyramid in Giza is 481 feet tall and is constructed out of 2.3 million stone blocks, weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons. These feats of engineering are so impressive that even today, scientists have not been able to prove exactly how they were constructed. Even today, the pyramids are an iconic world landmark and a huge tourist attraction for the people traveling to Egypt. Moving onward, let's talk about mummification. The method of embalming, treating, and preserving the dead in ancient Egypt is called mummification. Mummification is a process that took 70 days and involved removing all moisture from a decaying corpse. First, they removed and jarred all of the major organs, and then they packed and surrounded the body with natron. Natron is a heavy salt compound of soda ash and salt, kind of like baking soda. After drying out the bodies, ancient Egyptians would cover them with tree resins and then wrap the bodies in clean linen. Ancient Egyptians were so successful in preserving mummies that we can study mummies from 3,000 years ago and get a good idea of what they looked like, as well as what health issues plagued their society. Mummification was an expensive process, though, that was out of reach for many. Thus, most mummies we find today were either pharaohs or nobles. However, some common people and animals that are mummified have been found as well. We can't talk about ancient Egypt without mentioning hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics were a complex writing system which uses characters in the form of pictures. These characters can be read as pictures, symbols for sounds, and symbols for objects. The word hieroglyph comes from the Greek word for sacred carving and is first mentioned in the writings of Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BCE. Hieroglyphics, in the Greek sense of the word, specifically refer to the sacred writing found on Egyptian monuments. In the classical period of Egyptian writing, it is believed that the number of hieroglyphic symbols totaled 700 distinct characters. It was not until the end of the 18th century, when the members of Napoleon's expedition in Egypt discovered the Rosetta Stone, that modern minds were able to begin deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphics. Last but certainly not least in our background information is papyrus. Papyrus is both the woven paper invented by the ancient Egyptians and the plant that they used to make the material. The earliest rolls of papyrus were discovered in the tomb at Saqqara and dated to be from around 2900 BC. Papyrus was continually used until the 11th century AD, even though more modern paper had been invented in China around 105 AD. Text and scripts that have been found on papyrus include hieroglyphics, hieratic, Demotic, Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Aramaic. Papyrus was not just used to make paper, but the plant also found other uses, such as producing rope, baskets, and even sandals. Now for today's primary source. Today's primary source is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Papyrus of Ani, Frame 3. This document is held at the British Museum. It features Ani's judgment in the Hall of Judgment. Ani was a revered Egyptian scribe. Thus, in this scene, Ani's heart is seen on the left, and the feather of truth representing Ma'at is on the right. Ma'at is both a goddess in ancient Egypt and the personification of truth, justice, balance, and harmony. We can infer that Ani's heart is being judged on its truth, balance, and harmony. This primary source is dated to be from 1250 BC and was excavated at the tomb of Ani in Thebes. This form of the Book of Dead is painted on papyrus and is one of the best written collections of the Book of the Dead. Lastly, this primary source was acquired by the British Museum in 1888 from Sir E. A. Wallace Budge. Before shipping the 78-foot scroll to the British Museum, Sir Budge cut the document into 37 equal-sized portions, damaging the integrity of the papyrus scroll. Our secondary source is The Egyptians by Isaac Asimov. I chose this book mainly because of its interesting author. Isaac Asimov was a writer and professor of biochemistry at Boston University. Considered one of the premier science fiction writers of his time, you would most likely know him for his work, I, Robot, that was later turned into a major motion picture. It is interesting to find that one of the world's greatest science fiction authors was also a history nut. Published in 1967, The Egyptians is a short, concisely written history of Egypt, spanning from prehistoric Egypt to 1965. In 241 pages, Asimov gives students a good cursory glance at Egyptian history and the impact that it has had on the world as an empire and a more modern country. Again, with the book being published in 1967, it is a bit dated, but it is an easy read and I recommend it to all students who wish to delve a little deeper into Egypt. I have the book in my classroom available to you if you are interested. And now for our memory tool. People paint many hard pictures. People stands for Pharaoh. Paint stands for pyramids. Many stands for mummification. Hard stands for hieroglyphics. And pictures stands for papyrus. So remember, people paint many hard pictures in order to remember Pharaoh, pyramids, mummification, hieroglyphics, and papyrus. And lastly, our closure and review. Today we learned a great deal about ancient Egypt. If you can remember these three things, you'll ace the test. 1. The gift of the Nile defines Egyptian geography. The Nile is and always will be the lifeblood of ancient and modern Egypt. 2. The two P's, pharaohs and pyramids. Pharaohs were ancient Egypt's god kings, and the pyramids were their final resting place. And lastly, 3. Test the pH. Think papyrus and hieroglyphics. Papyrus being the Egyptian form of paper, and hieroglyphics the unique writing form from ancient Egypt.